All right, pencils down. The trade deadline is here. It's 3 p.m. on a Monday, March 21st. It is a live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, as the Florida Panthers have made their fair share of trades ahead, with still a little room for news to break as the trade deadline is here. Alex Baumgartner joins me from the Fifth Line 5R show to discuss the Florida Panthers and their trades ahead of the 2022 trade deadline.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also follow the national show and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark will be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So once again, this is the live show of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Anyone listening on the podcast version of this will be the Tuesday episode of the show. So everything has come and gone when it comes to the trade deadline. And here to discuss the trade deadline, he is a prior guest to the show from the Fifth Line 5R show, Alex Baumgartner. Alex, how are you doing, my dude?
As always.
Great to have you here, and we have quite a lot to talk about. Now the trade deadline has passed. There of course will be refreshing the feed in case news does come around as far as the trade deadline. A few things of note for the NHL. PK Subban is staying put in New Jersey. Jacob Chychrun is staying put in Arizona, according to some of the national reporters. But let's talk a little bit about where the Florida Panthers are and compare them kind of to the rest of the division. Of course, last week, the Florida Panthers trade Frank Vatrano to the New York Rangers for a 2022 fourth-round pick. Use that pick to get Ben Scherot, trade away a first-round pick as well in 2023. And then, of course, the big fish, Claude Giroux, coming to the Florida Panthers in exchange for a first, a third, and Owen Tippett as well in that trade for the Florida Panthers to the Philadelphia Flyers in that trade. And of course, Aaron Ekblad is on LTIR, freeing up that $7.5 million in cap space to go ahead and get Robert Haig using their 6th-round pick from the Sam Bennett deal in order to get Haig from the Buffalo Sabres. So, it's been a lot. The Florida Panthers, and as well as a team out west, as you could argue, had the most activity in this trade deadline. What, as far as a wellness check for you, Alex, how are you feeling about where the Florida Panthers, and what would you grade their trade deadline as?
I think Florida went in and they acquired pretty much everything they needed to go get. As we know from the last deadline, trades can trickle in up to 4 something hours after, as long as the trade was in by 2:59 p.m. to the Central Registry, I believe. We're still going to hear a little bit, but some of the big fish that we thought might have been moved didn't get moved, like you said, in Chychrun. Doesn't seem like Phil Kessel's getting moved, which I thought possibly could have happened, especially if he's getting retained. But in terms of the Florida Panthers, they got the guy I wanted, who is Claude Giroux. We've been looking for a guy to fit alongside Barkov and Verhaeghe on that top line, and, well, there's no better guy than Claude Giroux. He can play center, he can play right wing, he's 34 years old, so he's not the prime Claude Giroux we saw a couple years ago, but this is a guy with multiple years of playoff experience, captain of a team, went to the Stanley Cup Finals. He's a winner. He hasn't won a cup, but this guy can compete. He's a really good player, and he wanted to come to Florida. That was the only team he wanted to go to. This was his team. That's what he said. this is his team to go to. So the fact that the Florida Panthers are able to make themselves a destination, not just for the weather now, but for competitive hockey, for guys to come and look for rings. Joe Thornton, same thing, looking for a ring. He wants to come to Florida. Claude Giroux is the biggest deadline player available in a pretty long time. Wants to go to Florida. They did a great job there. They got their left-handed shot defenseman in Ben Scherot. Some people might not have expected him to come. The fact that he's 6'3", 234 pounds makes him the biggest defenseman on the Panthers blue line. He's only an inch shorter than Aaron Ekblad, but he has 30 pounds on most defensemen on this team. He's big. He's physical. He has playoff experience. They need guys with playoff experience. That's what they get. And then Robert Hagg. Ekblad goes down. LTIR, $7.5 million there. Add another depth defenseman for a 6th-round pick. I don't think they missed this deadline.
Not at all. And we thought after the deadline that they had last year, acquiring Sam Bennett, acquiring Brandon Montour for not mid-round picks, or a 2 and a 3, along with Emil Hyman for the Bennett trade. We thought the Florida Panthers really swung big, and then that was nothing compared to what happened here. So it's just crazy to think that the Panthers have just found a way to one up what they were doing, and it's crazy to see. And you think about where they are as far as the division. You think of Brandon Hagel to the Tampa Bay Lightning, a forward with term for 2023 and 24. First round pick Boris Kachuk and Taylor Radish. Nick Paul's also traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Matthew Joseph. Hampus Lindholm is on the Boston Bruins. Jake DeBrusk we did not get traded as far as this recording right here, but chances are that
extension. I think
he signed an extension for $2 million AAV for the next 2 years. So it makes his contract a little bit more movable for someone who might want to pick him up in the offseason. So that could wait for the offseason. And also Josh Brown, who could be a third pairing defenseman for the Boston Bruins. And of course, Toronto getting Mark Giordano from the Seattle Kraken. And so this is just going to be a
Armando, if I can just jump in real quick. We're talking about all these teams in the arm race. One of the most low-key teams that are going to make some noise in the playoffs are the Pittsburgh Penguins. They just acquired Rickard Rakell from the Anaheim Ducks for a prospect and a pick. Frank Zaravelli had it first. So that is breaking right now, happened 1 minute ago. So Rickard Rakell to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, and that's going to be continuing the theme of news that are going to be leaked after the trade deadline. We also got word of Andrew Kopp being traded from the Winnipeg Jets to the New York Rangers. Tyler Mott was also traded from the Vancouver Canucks to the New York Rangers as well. So a lot of activity for teams that are selling there. So going back to the division, who do you think outside of the Florida Panthers had probably who do you think had the best deadline as far as the Atlantic Division?
I'd say Tampa or Boston. It's kind of a toss-up. I think Tampa wanted their guy, Nick Paul. Joseph wasn't going to come back, and it was basically a UFA for a UFA. That's what it was going to happen. I believe, I don't know if he was going to be an RFA or a UFA, but from what I've read, if it went to arbitration, it wasn't going to work out too well. So that's why it was basically, do we want Paul or do we want Joseph? And they went with Nick Paul. They got their guy in Hagel. They gave up a lot for it, but that's what you're going to do. And Tampa has no problem in giving up a lot, which is why they have back-to-back Stanley Cups. That doesn't shock me at all. Boston made some nice moves too. They got Hampus Lindholm, and they have him for the long term, and they re-signed him. Toronto didn't get a goalie. That's why I can't put Toronto over those other three teams. Yes, they got Mark Giordano. Giordano wanted to come back to Toronto, like from his home area. That's the team he wanted to go to. That's why they got him, for not having to give up first. Good on them for that. Good move by Dubas. They didn't get a goalie.
Their intention was to get a goalie, but they signed Hari Satari who had to go through as well. And
then, yep.
the Arizona Coyotes kind of did them dirty a little bit, claiming Hari Satari off waivers. So, and Mrazek cleared waivers, and with a little bit of term left on his deal and a little bit of an injury history going back to Carolina, Toronto's in a little bit of trouble as far as that end of things. So, and the Boston Bruins are they're just right behind them, catching up, and they could definitely probably make a run to eventually get into that third spot.
If I can just jump in again, Mark Masters tweeted 3 minutes ago, Dubas says Rasmus Sandin is out for the foreseeable future, going on injured reserve. Now, the fact that they traded Travis Dermott yesterday for a pick, and now Sandin's going on injured reserve, they would have known this before 3 minutes ago.
Oh yeah.
So is there another move for a defenseman coming within the next couple of hours that went through, but we just don't know about yet? We're not 100% done on Toronto, I think. I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before I can accurately judge their trade deadline, because Sandin is a loss for them.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and that's what we'll keep refreshing our pages in order to bring any leaks that could come out after the fact. But let's talk. We're going to shift over to the next segment, talking about the impact of the 2 acquisitions for the Florida Panthers, Ben Scherot and Claude Giroux on the Panthers. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline, and college basketball tournament is finally upon us. And from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline.net is the best spot for all your sports, scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Back in the second part of this live trade deadline special show, I'm Armando Velez. I got Alex Baumgartner here from the Fifth Line 5R show joining me on this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And I decided to dig deeper into some of the numbers of both Claude Giroux and Ben Scherot. Let's first start with Claude Giroux. Career average of 55% in the faceoff circle, something I talked about with Frank Rikas yesterday on the Monday edition of the show. But he's sporting a career high in the dot, and people are wondering how many attempts is it that with Claude Giroux winning 61% of the faceoffs. According to Hockey Reference, 964 attempts on a faceoff. So just amazing numbers that Claude Giroux is putting in the dot. Second in points from the Philadelphia Flyers, and 42, and including 12 of them on the power play. Average time on ice, 19 minutes, 14 seconds, which was 6. Corsi 4 was second, right behind Sean Couturier. But Couturier has played 31 less games, Alex. So that is a big number for as far as that. And most average time on ice for the Philadelphia Flyers on the power play was Claude Giroux this season. So that is definitely a big addition for the Florida Panthers, bringing in a guy who who led the way for his former team. Of course, we're talking about a longtime captain here, but this could be the Florida Panthers power play has improved so much in the last few weeks. And just adding a guy like Claude Giroux, you could either see Anthony Duclair be slid down to the second unit. We could also see Sam Reinhart be shifted down a little bit as well. It's just continuing to be that embarrassment of riches for this Florida Panthers team. Just power play time on ice is just the one that stuck out to me at 306.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's one of the areas that not necessarily has been a strong point for the Panthers this season, the face-off dot. And just before I continue, this is a pretty big trade. We normally say Carolina seemed kind of quiet today. They got their guy. They got Max Domi. So Max Domi is heading to Carolina. And they re-signed Jesperi Kotkaniemi to an 8-year contract worth a $4.82 million AAV. So Max Domi is going to Carolina. Elliot Friedman has it. Pierre LeBrun had it. And looks like Chris Johnson had it. Yeah, those guys had it. So Carolina gets a feisty one.
They have a little bit of
them for the playoffs. And there's a
Domi
little
has
bit
a
of
little bit of
history
history
between
with Domi and Ekblad.
Ekblad.
Mm-hmm. So that'll be an interesting Eastern Conference final if they both happen to reach there. And of course, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, part of the offer sheet from Montreal, they traded away a first-round pick and a third, I believe, for Kotkaniemi as part of Montreal not signing the offer sheet for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. But just incredible that Carolina just at the final minute. I was thinking about a few quiet teams. Carolina, the New York Islanders, Vegas Golden Knights, who are just in a world of trouble right now based on their deadline, and just wow, Max Domi is a big addition. Someone who's been moved around here and there, and now in his third team in just a few seasons. And just let's go back to Claude Giroux and the power play numbers and the power play minutes. As far as I think we're gonna see Claude Giroux immediately go on that top pairing, regardless, based on the experience there and the time on ice. I think it might be someone like Anthony Duclair shifted down one to the second.
It's gonna have to be Duclair because Reinhart. It's so hard. You're not gonna run 5 forwards. That's a terrible idea. You're not gonna run 5 forwards. You can't take Huberdeau off. You can't take Barkov off. And you're going to have, I guess they're going to do Montour or Uyghur for however long it is. It's been Uyghur. It was Uyghur last game. But you're just going to have to figure out which defenseman you want up there. Is it Reinhart or do you want Duclair off? I think they're both right-handed shots. So, honestly, I don't know. But, yeah, I think Duclair is the one that you can slot onto the second line. And then you're like, oh, one of our best goal scorers from our first power play line is now on our second line. And who knows, maybe they don't want to break that up. And then you have a little Claude Giroux, Sam Bennett action on that second power play unit.
That could be also because Duclair also went on a streak of a few games going with a power play goal as well.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking of it, how are you gonna break that up? How are you gonna take them off?
I don't know.
you might have to slide Reinhart down to that second line, and then Reinhart's playing with, if you want to keep Marchman up there, he has his predominantly most used line mate there. Mm-hmm. There's no Lundell for a little bit longer, so I think maybe Giroux takes Reinhardt's spot for a game or two, just get the get into the motions of that first power play unit, because that's going to be explosive to see those guys saucing the puck around.
I'm really excited for that, and it's crazy how we have to wait until Thursday for a game. Now it's just a little bit of a wait for all of us just to see where this team is going to be. Let's move on to Ben Scherot. Of course, there's all talk about some of the numbers that Ben Scherot made have had, especially goals against as far as goals against per 60 at even strength. Compared to the rest of his team, even strength goals against, he's outside of the top 20 of his own team, which is a little bit of a concern when you bring someone like Ben Scherot in. 18 points in 54 games, 2 points on the power play. But he led the Montreal Canadiens in total time on ice. But this is the opposite of Claude Giroux, where not used much on the power play, logged minutes on the penalty kill is 3 minutes and 11 seconds average time on ice per game. And that is he's right in the middle of the pack when it comes to goals against on the PK. Aaron Ekblad's out for a little bit.
So Armando, I will tell you this. It's clear that the Florida Panthers hockey operations team does not care about traditional advanced analytics. Otherwise, they wouldn't get guys like Scherot from Montreal or Montour and Haig from Buffalo. If I can remember, the second Montour got acquired, I had people in my mentions telling me he was a terrible acquisition. Look at his WAR score. And I said, he played on the worst team in the NHL.
Same thing with Bennett. Same thing with Bennett in Calgary.
Sam Bennett and Claude Giroux is a superstar. When he was in his prime, he's a superstar. Superstars, no matter how bad of a team they're on, their stats are going to look good. Reinhart not necessarily superstar, but he was the second best player in Buffalo his entire career. Him and Jack Eichel, they were putting up good numbers. But yeah, Chiarot, when Montreal was a mess this year, loses half their team, no goalie, no captain. It was an absolute mess. I'm not surprised the stats don't look as good as the type of player he is. He's physical. They had the best penalty kill pretty much of all time in the playoffs last year. It was like a 91%. Like, it was absolutely remarkable what that team was doing on the penalty kill. Obviously, large part to Carey Price, but ask any player that played against Ben Sherratt in the playoffs. They don't want a 6'3", 235-pound guy hitting him in the back.
And with Ekblad's injury, we could see one of two things. We could see a Weegar-Sherratt combo on the PK. We could see that, or we could see Forsling Weegar as well.
I like Forsling just because Forsling's so active with his stick. I think Weegar's better at neutral zone takeovers, where Forsling has, I don't know if he has a longer stick or a longer reach, but he seems to have better foot speed when turning in transition than Weegar might have, just by a little bit. So I think active sticks, Gustav Forsling has to be, the top guy you're looking at.
And also the great thing about it is, again, Ben Sherratt led the Canadiens in shorthanded time on ice. That number is going to go down with the Florida Panthers. So also that could also mean with better talent and less log time on ice, that goals against while on the PK can go down as well. So that is a hopeful part of me for sure. But of course, you mentioned it. Montreal was a mess and was a part of a penalty killing unit last year that really helped them in their defense to get them all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So Bill Zito talked about in a press conference that experience matters, and bringing someone like Sherratt in, bringing that experience. And they're bringing two. It's funny. At least 3 out of the 4 older guys on the roster have been to a Stanley Cup final and lost. And they got one guy who is gone to a Stanley Cup and won. So 3 who have gone there and fallen short, 1 who has gotten there and won it all. So it's trickling down from those older guys all the way to like all the core, and it's just a good mix of everything for this team. So before we got about like 8 or so minutes before we wrap up on this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to talk more about the rest of the NHL in their trade deadline. But first, we're going to tell you all about Rock Auto. And with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right? Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection. Reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Back on this third and final segment of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Once again, we are live just 23 minutes after the trade deadline. The Florida Panthers, as of this recording, didn't make an additional move ahead of their trade deadline. Refreshing right now. Don't see anything for the Panthers. But yeah, so let's talk about the rest of the NHL and some of the teams that
Armando,
probably...
Tampa just made another move.
Oh,
Riley
what
Nash.
Happened?
Riley Nash from
Tampa.
Yep.
For what?
The rich get richer.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing for the return yet, but Riley Nash from Columbus to Tampa.
It's going to be, Alex, regardless of home ice advantage, it's going to be another uphill climb to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning again. And of course, setting the tone for by not dropping 2 if they are to meet again. But chances are they won't have to get to they won't. Chances are they won't be facing each other in round 1. So honestly, at this point, I'm just thinking about getting that round 1 monkey off their back and then
Yeah.
worry about Tampa later. So
Well, round one, you're probably going to run into Boston,
Washington.
Toronto, or maybe Washington. I do have to say I forgot Toronto did acquire Lyubushkin, who is a defenseman. I don't know if it was a day or two ago, but they do have more defensemen that I didn't realize they had. So it is an arms race in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm. And one of their defensemen went on LTIR just a few weeks ago. I think it was I'm blanking on the name. I'm looking up on Cat Friendly right now. Jake Muzzin. Jake Muzzin just went on LTIR just a few weeks ago for the Maple Leafs. So definitely needed a defenseman over there. But one team that I'm kind of confused about, but I kind of get it, is the Seattle Kraken. Quite a few players have been traded to their former teams. Mason Appleton got traded back to the Winnipeg Jets for a 4th round pick. They traded back with Washington. Trying to look at that trade. They traded Marcus Johansson to the Washington Capitals. They're sending all of their original some of their picks from the expansion draft and some trades after that back. I mean, they traded Vitek Vanacek back to Washington before the season even started. But Colorado was pretty quiet. They were noisy in the beginning of the trade deadline. Then in between they were quiet, and then just the last 30 minutes they get Arturi Lankinen from the Montreal Canadiens, and they get Andrew Cogliano mixing in their bottom 6. Gabriel Landeskog is out. He's not on LTIR from what I saw earlier. I was a little confused about that, but just that team out west, Colorado. Is there? Do you think there's a team that could get in their way or could possibly like take them down? You're muted, Alex. Can't hear you. So, while Alex is getting that situated, a few other moves that that around the NHL around this trade deadline is that Marc-Andre Fleury has been traded to the Minnesota Wild, and Cam Talbot. It's funny because Cam Talbot was named as an All-Star for the Minnesota Wild just a few weeks ago in Vegas, and with the switching between Kaapo Kähkönen and Cam Talbot in goal, it's just a little bit inconsistent with the goaltending. Their defense isn't the best behind either of those two. But Marc-Andre Fleury brings that backstop to the Minnesota Wild and really challenging for that Central Division. Probably going to finish in the. Oh, now I can hear you. There you go.
All right, keep going.
So Marc-Andre Fleury to the Minnesota Wild from the Chicago Blackhawks. Right now, looking at the standings for the Central Division out west, with the Minnesota Wild as they traded for Marc-Andre Fleury, they got the goalie help they needed. So that was what. How far do you think Marc-Andre Fleury can take them, and can they overthrow Colorado in the Central?
Well, before my mic was muted, the team that I did have that could compete with Colorado was in fact the Minnesota Wild. And I say that because they have a goaltending tandem now of Talbot and Fleury. I already like their team on paper. I like some of the size they have with guys like Greenway. I like the forwards with Kaprizov, with Fiala, Zuccarello, and they got some nice guys on the back end, including Matt Dumba. So I think that they have a good team to compete with anyone in the West. Colorado is still going to be the favorite, but I have Minnesota up there. We can never count out Vegas just with the firepower they have, but right now I'm saying it's the Minnesota Wild that can possibly dethrone Colorado there. The other team, not including Vegas, Calgary is always a little dangerous come playoff time.
Calle Yarncrook.
So you never know.
They got Calle Yarncrook from the Seattle Kraken as far as there, and they have goaltending. Former Florida Panther prospect Jacob Markstrom has just made so much strides this season. He's not going to win the Vezina. It's Igor Shesterkin's trophy this year. And New York, I thought possibly Alexander Georgiev was going to increase his trade value after that monster performance against the Carolina Hurricanes, a 2-0 shutout. And the New York Rangers are another team that is improving some of their forward depth. I mean, Frank Vatrano was playing on the same line as Artemi Panarin and Strome just the other day. He gets an empty netter just the other day. So just happy for Frank Vatrano getting his first goal, first 2 points.
George Richards. It sounds like the Florida Panthers are done. Bill Zito on way to media availability.
Well, and that is the perfect time as our time here on the live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Live edition is up. Talk a little bit review of the trades for the Florida Panthers. Frank Vatrano to the New York Rangers for fourth. They used that pick to trade for Ben Scherot, Tice Milanich, and a 2023 first. Claude Giroux for Owen Tippett, 2024 first and a 2023 third. Aaron Ekblad on LTIR created that trade for Robert Haig, defenseman, for a 2022 sixth-round pick. So no other moves for the Florida Panthers. This is the roster they got as they are looking to win their first playoff series since 1996 and to hopefully be hoisting that Stanley Cup come June. So, Alex, thank you once again for joining me on this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell my listeners where they could find you online.
All right, you guys can find me on Twitter at Baumgartner91. You can find me at the Fifth Line 5R Twitter where I do the tweets and content on 5 Reasons Sports and 5 Reasons YouTube. We should be having a show sometime tonight, hopefully.
Awesome. And for those listening, tune in to the Fifth Line 5R show. And people listening on the podcast version of this show, by the time this comes out, that show would have already happened, but still subscribe to the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel so you'll always see what the guys from the Fifth Line 5R show got going on the show. So thank you once again, Alex, for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark, where they'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. And for those listening to this podcast live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, after tuning into this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, make sure to join Flip Livingstone and make sure to join the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Show with Flip and Steele on the YouTube page of the Locked On Fantasy Show. Well, I will be joining them right after this live edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers. So make sure to tune in as I will be making a guest appearance on the show. So I'm Armando Velez with Alex Baumgartner, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.